The Independent Electoral Commission CEO Simon Mamabolo says delays in the election timetable could cause a logistical disaster. A number of parties, including the UDM, ATM and BOSA, are calling on the Commission to reconsider and to extend the deadline for paperwork and payments. Yesterday, the IEC published its timetable of deadlines for candidates, but parties and independent candidates have raised concerns over the schedule. They say there are inadequacies in voter education, collection of support lists for new parties, and just generally in overall preparation. Well, let's bring in Terry Tselane, who is the chairperson of the Institute of Election Management Service Africa. Terry, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. I'm confused by this discussion around the need for more time, given that we have a lot more time for these elections 2024, insofar as when the election was proclaimed compared to the election date versus 2019.
Indeed, but remember that there are quite a number of complexities related to these elections. It will be for the first time that the independents are participating in the elections. The kind of the requirements from political parties that are entering for the first time is onerous. And you may recall also that there was a court judgment pertaining to the number of signatures that an individual would require to be able to participate in the process. So there are quite a number of new things that are being put in place for the first time. And then this would obviously have an impact in preparations for the elections. But I think what is also making things a little bit more complex and difficult is the fact that Parliament has not even finalized the framework within which the elections are going to be taking place. They are still busy with the Electoral Matters Amendment Bill, and that has not as yet been signed into law. And it's got implications for the preparations of the elections. So even though there are more days, as you correctly pointed out, this time I think they've got about 93 days to have the election. So the election timetable, it's an election timetable of about 93 days. But at the same time, there are issues around whether sufficient mechanisms were put in place to enable the political parties, especially the new entrants, to be able to prepare for these elections.
You sound like you agree with these political parties raising these objections, Terry?
I've got an appreciation of the issues that they are raising, even though it is going to be difficult for them to be accommodated within the current election timetable. You may recall that previously I had suggested that the election should actually be on the last possible Wednesday, which is the 31st of July, in order to enable political parties and participants to get ready to participate in the process. Now, the president has already proclaimed, and the premiers have proclaimed the 29th as the date of the new elections. It means everybody has got to operate within what you have, which is really providing a limited scope within which you can maneuver.
Wow. So I mean, what the IEC has said is that essentially this is a moving train that can't be stopped. This timetable is cast in stone. So objection or not, this is how things are going to unfold as we build up to the 29th of May.
Unfortunately, the political parties have got to operate within what the IEC has proclaimed, which is the current election timetable.
Sure.
And I don't see how they can change any aspects related to the election timetable.
They've also raised concerns around the deadline for paperwork and the deadline for payments, because certain payments need to be made by political parties and by independents. Do you reckon that raising those funds probably could be a challenge for some parties, some independents?
I don't think the issue of raising funds is really such a critical matter, because political parties that are participating are supposed to have known, including the independents, that there would be a minimum amount of resources that would actually be required for the purpose of participation in the elections. So the issue for me is the number of signatures that are required within this specific period.
And perhaps voter education as well, Terry Tselane, because the ballot paper, for the first time we've got 3 ballots which we will be casting our votes on. That's going to be incredibly confusing. not only for people who are going to the polls for the first time, but I think maybe for all of us to know exactly which vote is going where and for what purpose. And then the other issue, of course, is that it might not be a ballot paper with just the parties running on one side and your option to vote on the other side. There may be a number of columns, just given the sheer number of parties and independents that we have in these polls. It's a big ask, isn't it, for the voter?
Absolutely. And I agree with you that to a large extent voter education has actually been compromised, not only by the Commission, but also by all the parties that are supposed to be involved in educating people about the new system and then how the new system is going to be operating. So there'll be those 3 ballot papers, one being the regional ballot paper that contains the names of independents, as well as the political parties that will be contesting those 200 regional seats. And then there will be a ballot paper at the national level that is for proportional representation for the 200 seats that are contested only by the political party. And the third one being the provincial ballot. For the legislature, which contains both the independents and political parties. So it is likely to cause some confusion, to a voter if a voter is not aware of what's supposed to be happening. Yeah. And a little bit of voter education would have assisted to ameliorate some of this complexity.
I mean, is it fair to say that political parties themselves are also having to come to the party insofar as voter education is concerned? It's not just down to the IEC.
Absolutely. Voter education is a joint responsibility. It's a joint responsibility between the Electoral Commission, political parties, and civil society organizations. Yeah. And I think to a large extent, political parties, instead of actually focusing on voter education, they decided to put their resources on preparing for the logistics of the elections and canvassing for support. And that has added in terms of creating that vacuum that we are now talking about.
Given everything that we've discussed, though, the Commission presented its timetable on the 23rd of February, and according to the IEC, none of the represented political parties expressed any concern at the time. So, why now?
Precisely. In terms of Section 20 of the Electoral Act, the Commission, before publishing the election timetable, has got to consult with parties that are represented within party liaison committee. And one would assume that that consultation has already happened. And if there were no objections at the time when this was raised with the political parties and they agreed to the election timetable, there isn't much that can actually happen. Yeah. One, of course, appreciates the fact that not every political party and independent participates in the party liaison committee. But unfortunately, in terms of legislation, that is the only structure that is supposed to be consulted before the publication of the election timetable.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a bit nervous, Terry, going into the election that's meant to be as important as 1994.
Absolutely. I'm as anxious as you are. And I've indicated also some of the complexities that are associated with these elections, and whether, given the time that we have, the Commission will actually be able to prepare for a smooth election. That is an issue that, of course, worries me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this discussion is far from over. But Terry Tselane, let me thank you for your time, giving us some analysis of the complexities, and there are many, of these elections on the 29th of May. Terry Tselane is the chairperson of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa.